Okay, so welcome everybody to the conference with le Cercle des Langues. Today we are going to be discussing handling complaints and difficult conversations at work. We are going to learn how to handle complaints and delicate conversations in English in a professional and diplomatic manner. For the first 25 minutes, I will present the conference. And if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make, please either put them into the chat or write them on a piece of paper. And for the last 5 minutes of this evening's conference, we will be able to discuss them. So let's begin. Today's conference will have 4 parts. The first part is understanding complaints and difficult conversations. The second part is in the professional world, what is that professional and diplomatic language? Part 3 will talk about structuring a response to complaints. And the fourth part of today's conference will be cultural differences in complaint handling. So let's begin. Today we are going to learn how to handle complaints and delicate conversations in English in a professional and diplomatic manner. Therefore, from now on, we recommend you take note of what's coming up. Understanding complaints and difficult conversations. So, what are complaints and difficult conversations? A complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction about a service, a product, or a situation. A difficult conversation is a challenging discussion where sensitive topics, disagreements, or emotions are involved. Why are they important? When you face difficulties at work with complaints, they help you to build trust and improve workplace relationships, resolve issues effectively, and prevent escalation. And the last thing is they reflect professionalism and emotional intelligence. Our goal is to equip you with the language and strategies to manage complaints and sensitive discussions diplomatically. Because there will always be these kinds of moments where they are not completely positive. And we need to know how to handle these moments in ways that are professional and polite. Why do these moments happen? Complaints and difficulty conversations usually happen due to miscommunication or misunderstanding, unmet expectations, or the third one, cultural differences. So we have a small question, and if you feel comfortable enough, please share. Have you faced them in your personal life? Write an example in the chat. Have you faced a miscommunication or a misunderstanding? Have you faced unmet expectations or cultural differences? So if you would like to share such a moment, you may now put it into the chat. Okay, so I'm going to carry on. So what types of complaints and difficult conversations could we find? Oh, before we carry on, we do actually have a response. Let's have a look. So Celine says, I faced unmet expectations. The work of a colleague wasn't good enough. Thank you, Celine, for sharing your experience. And this is true. Unmet expectations are quite challenging, especially when we have an expectation, when we have a level of work that we would like to be delivered. So, thank you for sharing. So, what are the types of complaints and difficult conversations? Complaints and difficult conversations can arise for various reasons. These typically fall into four main categories. The first type of complaint or difficult conversation could be service related. For example, poor customer support. It could be interpersonal. That means conflict with a colleague. It can be policy related. That means a disagreement with company rules. Or it can be performance related. That means that it's feedback on your work quality. So, what are the most common challenges in handling complaints? The first one we get is managing emotions, yours and the other person's. According to emotional regulation theory, taking deep breaths and pausing before responding helps maintain control. Because complaints or certain comments in the discussion could cause a reaction, and it is the reaction that we would like to try to control or make sure that it is done with the best of intentions. The second challenge is keeping a neutral and professional tone, because as we argue, we tend to raise our voices. So people tend to mirror the emotion and tone of those they interact with. Staying calm and neutral prevents unnecessary escalation. Finding a fair and practical solution. Using active listening and collaborative problem solving increases the chances of a mutually beneficial outcome. To remember what is active listening is our ability to be fully present when someone else is speaking. What is some of this professional and diplomatic language? What can we use in these moments? So, diplomatic language is respectful, tactful communication that focuses on solving issues without offending or escalating tensions. Let's check some polite ways to face these situations. The first way is softeners and polite expressions. So, using softeners, they generally come at the beginning of the sentence and prepares your listener for the bad news you are giving. A bad example, I have to cancel the meeting. So, quite direct. A good example is I'm afraid I have to cancel the meeting. It seems that instead of you are wrong, would you mind if instead of I need you to, I was wondering if instead of tell me, perhaps we could instead of we should, would it be possible to instead of I want to, and it might be a good idea to instead of do this. So these expressions soften the request. Diplomatic and direct expressions. When we say emotions are running high, if emotions are running high, it means that people in a group are becoming upset, angry, or agitated. So the moment you feel that the tension in the room is becoming or is increasing, that is the perfect moment to use the expression emotions are running high. We can also say that people are on edge. It means very nervous or tense. The interviewees were all on edge as they waited for their names to be called. The clock is ticking. We say the clock is ticking when there is a tight timeline or approaching a deadline. When someone is offended, it is emotionally or they are emotionally hurt or upset. And then finally, we talk about cushioning the blow. This is to make a bad situation or bad news seem less serious. The second way we can offer solutions diplomatically is through modal verbs such as would, could, may, or might. Including their use means that it doesn't sound demanding or like an order. A bad example would be, I want more time, or give me an answer by tomorrow. We could say, I could do with more time, or could you give me an answer by tomorrow? And a third is to use qualifiers, excuse me. Qualifiers are words that increase or decrease the impact of the other words. For example, we are having problems with the new medical device. This would be a bad example. A good example would be, we are having one or two problems with the new product. We are going to run slightly over budget, and the launch plans are a little bit behind schedule. So we are diminishing the severity of the situation. We are bringing that down. So we are trying to calm the situation down. There are also some key expressions that we could use to offer solutions diplomatically. So the first sentence is, here is what I suggest we do. I will do my best to resolve this. Would this solution work for you? One possible solution could be, how about we try this approach? I'd be happy to assist in finding a solution. So how do we structure a response to complaints? We have a 4-step response model. The first one is to listen actively, to pay attention without interrupting. The second is to acknowledge and empathize, recognize the person's feelings. We then clarify and propose solutions, understand the issue, and suggest a fair solution. And finally, we follow up. We ensure the solution is implemented and the issue is resolved. So, what are some key phrases we can use for handling complaints? When we acknowledge the complaint, that means we admit that the complaint exists. We could say, I understand your concern. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. We can also apologize professionally with the expressions, I apologize for the inconvenience. I'm sorry to hear that you had this experience. When we are clarifying the issue, we say, could you please clarify what happened? Or can you tell me more about the situation? So let's look at an example dialogue for handling a complaint. So the situation, a client complains about a delayed delivery. So you say, I understand your frustration. I apologize for the delay. Let me check the status and find a solution for you. The client, obviously frustrated, he says, I needed it yesterday. And you respond, I will prioritize your delivery and keep you updated. So before we move on, you can see in the situation that the person who is handling the complaint remains calm and is very polite because the client already is experiencing many different emotions. So in that moment, it is our responsibility to remain calm and to make them understand that having their needs met is a priority. What are some cultural differences in complaint handling? So, the difference between the French and English cultures. In the French workplace culture, they value directness. So, that is something that is culturally valued. Hierarchy and responsibility are also valued. People speak bluntly and they expect efficiency. In the English workplace culture, they prefer diplomacy, indirectness, and collaboration, softening criticism with polite phrases. A French speaker may find English complaints too vague, while an English speaker may feel French complaints are too harsh. Now remember, these are general ideas and may not be correct for every single situation. So here we are just giving what could be the differences in culture and how we then have to approach these situations. What do we do when there is a late report submission complaint? So this is giving us an example. The French manager says the report was late. That's not acceptable. What happened? The English manager would say, I noticed the report was a bit late. Was everything okay? What is the difference? The French manager is direct and firm, focusing on responsibility. The English manager is softer and more indirect, prioritizing rapport. You see, we are not saying one is better than the other. We are just saying that it is different. Let's look at poor work quality from a colleague. A French employee might say, their work is sloppy, it's becoming a real problem. The English employee might say, I've noticed some issues with their work. Do you think we could find a solution? The difference? The French employee bluntly criticizes the problem. The English employee softens the complaint and suggests a solution. So with French complaints, we tend to be straightforward and authoritative. And with English complaints are often polite, indirect, and solution focused. So do you believe this is true? Feel free to write your opinion in the chat if you want to. So I will give you some time to put your opinions in the chat, and I will come back to those once we have finished. So feel free to give us your opinion, and I will check back in before we end. So in conclusion, handling complaints and difficult conversations in a professional and diplomatic way is key to building trust, resolving issues, and maintaining positive relationships at work. By applying the strategies shown through the conference, you can transform challenging situations into opportunities to improve and strengthen your workplace environment. Thank you for your attention. So let's go back to, before we end, let's look at what Celine shared with us. She said it's true for the British English speakers, but it is also true for English American speakers. And Celine was asking a question, and I think that it could be true. Remember, we've got American English and we've got British English, but we also have different mannerisms between those two cultures. So I actually think there could be slight differences between those cultures as well. Because remember, we are not talking about English speakers, we are talking about the culture, which could be completely different. I'll give you another example. I am South African. So even though I am an English speaker, we have a completely different culture to American and to British. So it's important to think about culture versus language. But it's a very good question. Raymond says, and the German one, they could possibly have their own cultural differences and how they communicate with each other as well. And then I think it's true. Thank you so much for sharing that, because we have these differences. And as I said, it could be that it's a stereotype or a general opinion, and there are certain situations that are different. The most important thing, and that is the point of the conference, is that we are able to resolve these disagreements, these complaints, in a way that can bring the customer satisfaction and that you can be happy at the end. So thank you everybody for joining me for this evening's conference. Do you have any questions or comments that you would like to make? No?
Bluntly. What does that mean? Bluntly.
Bluntly. So when we look at the word blunt, I want you to think about the word in French. So I'm just going to have a look here for you to see if there's a translation. En français, on dit sans détour. Franchement. Okay? So to be frank, to be blunt means vraiment d'être direct. So we don't cover it. We really go quite directly. Est-ce que c'est clair?
Thank you.
Wonderful, my absolute pleasure. So Odette has given us a wonderful comment here, and she said, intercultural management can give some tips to handle multicultural complaint situations. Absolutely. Intercultural management is something that is very important. In companies where you are dealing with different cultures, it's important to understand how to approach those situations, because they will not always be between a French person and an English person. They could be between many other nationalities, which in turn have many different cultures. So thank you for that. So everybody, you have the PDF, and I hope to see you in next week's conference where we will discuss something new. So thank you everyone for joining us. Oh, we have one more comment before everyone leaves, and it is Sophie. Sophie said, I work with different cultures, and I think Americans are more direct than the French. They don't want to waste time, but I agree that the French are very authoritarian. So Wonderful, Sophie. So you see, there is not a one size fits all. Everyone is so different that sometimes you could feel, no, but they are more direct or not. And it's true. The most important thing is that we find that way to communicate so that we reach the agreement where everyone is calm. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I truly appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see everybody next week. Please remember to download the PDF from the chat.
It's done.
Yes, it's all there. So thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Good weekend. Thank you, Shalana. Bye.